Horror comes in many shapes, forms, sizes, and flavors, but no one has quite captured its essence as well as H.P. Lovecraft back in the early 20th century. His exploration of the cosmic horrors that lie beyond universes observable by the human eye and the effects they had on the human mind are some of the bleakest portrayals of our society. And perhaps it is that fact, and not the grotesque monsters of his stories, that makes him one of the greatest horror writers of all time. But for the purpose of this video, we are most definitely going to focus on the latter, because, believe it or not, 10 years ago, IDW Publication introduced the Elder Gods to their shared universe, and the consequences were understandably catastrophic. Infestation 2 is a crossover event that includes most of IDW's major titles, from G.I. Joe to CVO, Covert Vampire Operations, and everything in between. However, for the purposes of this video, we are going to focus on how the arrival of the Great Old Ones changed the lives of the Transformers as we know them. So, strap on your seatbelts and keep your hands away from the chimney of this steam car because it's going to be one hell of a ride. This is Infestation 2 Transformers Explored. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is Infestation all about, and how did it start in the first place? Infestation 2, as its name suggests, is the sequel to the first Infestation event, which played out exactly how it sounds. The first Infestation saw the Undermined from the Zombies vs. Robots universe spill over into the CVO continuity, and thereby the rest of the major IDW titles, which also included the Transformers. Towards the end of that arc, the CVO team leader Cross got a major power boost thanks to the magically enhanced tech called Artilica, and was able to beat back the combined alien demon threat of the Outbreak. But if you know anything about any kind of magic, then you will know that it always comes at a cost. And in Cross's case, that was letting loose the oldest horrors of the cosmos. The main Infestation 2 storyline begins with the description of the most perfect prison in the world. It exists at the edge of the universe, where all known things come to their natural conclusion. Its walls exist outside space and time, and just as well because the inmates will often drive you crazy before taking your soul in thrall. These prisoners have the power to call upon sentient beings, but only the ones who are most sensitive to their existence are the ones who can truly try to perceive these formless monstrosities. In the 1930s, Howard Philip Lovecraft became one such man when he channeled the calls of the Elder Gods into horrifying pulp stories that ended up garnering him a small cult following. Lovecraft's work drew the attention of a secret society called Oblivion, which was tasked with assuring that the Elder Gods never retook Earth, and so they decided to either convince him to abandon his work or end his life before irreversible damage was done. They failed to do both. Though Lovecraft eventually died due to intestinal cancer, aka an alien growing in his stomach being covered up, his stories endured the test of time and made him an icon of the horror genre. Though none of his fans had a fraction of the sensitivity to the power of the Elder Gods, their collective belief in his stories and the power of the Artilica, which Cross had gained, caused the unthinkable to happen. It orchestrated a prison break. The Great Old Ones, the mania-inducing, fear-arousing denizens of the outer worlds, had broken through and were finally free to ravage the worlds denied them for so many millennia. It began with the CVO continuity, but was soon affecting every major IP owned by IDW Publishing, and that includes the Transformers. But these aren't exactly the Cybertronians you're used to seeing. Infestation 2, Transformers, is a sequel within a sequel to Transformers Hearts of Steel. While most of the other titles got infested more or less in the main timeline of their respective continuities, the Transformers face a more temporal aspect of the Great Old Ones. Lovecraft's descriptions of beings like Azathoth and Nyarlathotep made it evident that their existence was constant across all of space and time, which means it is also true for the Elseworld-style tale of Transformers Hearts of Steel, which saw the Autobots and Decepticons re-emerge in the 19th century in a steampunk-inspired setting. The storyline focused on Tobias Muldoon, A failing inventor whose drive for pursuing science made him as endearing as his constant aloofness to the situation at hand made him goofy. At the start of the series, Tobias builds a submarine for his patron that ends up drowning soon after he fires it up. Disgraced and outcast from the scientific community, he inadvertently starts helping Decepticons in their quest to conquer Earth under the misconception that they were helping him realize his dreams. Tobias is able to prove his innocence with the help of his Autobot friend Bumblebee, and drive the Decepticon threat back to where it came from. He won the hand of Kitty in the process, and everything worked out in the end thanks to John Henry. Yes, you heard that right. Real-life legends and writers like Mark Twain and Jules Verne were a part of the Hearts of Steel event, and that trend continued with Infestation 2, but on a far larger scale. This version of Transformers is actually set in an alternative reality where the Cybertronians arrived on Earth during the prehistoric era, fought their war for dominance in the form of fantastical beasts, we have no idea where they found them, and lay dormant until the Industrial Revolution hit America. It is this timeline which is affected by the arrival of the Elder Gods, and the one leading their charge is Lovecraft's most iconic creation till date. So now that you have an idea of what an infestation is and where this one is set, let's dive into the comics themselves, shall we? They answer a call as old as time itself, but it isn't the one they were expecting to receive. Our story begins in the year 1887, deep under the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean. The narrator informs us that the Decepticons had been lying here in the primordial silt for countless millennia, waiting for a call, a signal that would reactivate their synapses and get them back online to serve their master Megatron once again. We see Scalor, the literally stinking Seacon, lying at the bed of the North Atlantic Ocean, when a few glowing orbs of light start approaching him. At first, we're led to believe that these are one of those super creepy deep-sea fishes that use their light to lure their prey, like the one from Finding Nemo, but it turns out it's something much worse. Scalor's body is found by this queer race of fish people who managed to reignite his synapses and get his systems working again, but something was definitely off about this resurrection. See, the Cybertronians are a race of sentient robotic beings, meaning their entire bodies are composed of inorganic materials. But somehow, Scalor was turned into an organic being with his body producing an eerie yellow glow, and he wasn't the only one. The next page shows us that all the remaining Seacons, Snaptrap, Nautilator, Overbite, Seawing, and even Tentakill, had all been reawakened from their slumber by the same kind of power. The narrator informs us that until they receive the signal to begin their mission, a Decepticon will lie dormant, and now the Seacons have been called to service, but not for Megatron. They were in thrall to the oldest threat that the human species had ever encountered, and this threat made its lair deep under the seas of the Earth. Thousands of centuries ago, when Earth was still populated by invertebrate amorphisms, a city whose name no human tongue can pronounce fell from the sky and buried itself deep within the North Atlantic. Well, South Pacific if we're going to be totally faithful to Lovecraft, but this is a Transformers story, so let's keep moving forward. This corpse city, the closest approximate of whose name is Riley, is where madness and euphoria emanate from, and fear plagues the minds of lesser men. Don't believe us? Just ask the residents of Innsmouth. But it is this place where the Seacons converge for a meeting with their new, somehow even older and more terrible overlord, and spend a year plotting their machinations to take over the world above, and destroy it in the process. A sunken ship and a bumbling train car. The Autobots' response. The year shifts to 1888. The USS Miskatonic, shout out to Miskatonic University, is making its way to Ireland and sailing through a particularly stormy patch of the Atlantic Ocean. Two sailors are arguing about the state of the ship as one tells the other that the line is about to blow up, making the second remark that it was already blowing up. The more experienced sailor was about to share his experience of a far worse storm he faced in '66 when the strangest thing happened. The ship came to a dead halt. This was in the middle of a storm that was snapping their ship's lines and causing tides unlike what most sailors would even dare to sail over. The captain was rightly flabbergasted by the halt and demanded to know who issued the command to stop all movement, but his mates responded by telling him that no one had. The ship had simply stopped moving. The next panel shows the captain demanding that they begin moving once again, else they are dead in the water, but his mate replies that the engine is going full tilt and the ship is still not moving, as we see a gigantic figure rise out of the depths with red eyes burning like lava. The creature uses its tentacles to pull the ship underneath the water, but just before it can do so, one of the gun turrets on the ship comes loose and dives into the sea. The Autobot Ironhide remembers Optimus Prime's directions to not reveal themselves until the situation had changed. Ironhide deemed a large, tentacle monster sinking a ship single-handedly change enough, and dived into the Atlantic, intent on informing the other Autobots of this new extraterrestrial threat that had emerged on Earth. In San Francisco, Tobias Muldoon and his wife Kitty are taking a late-night walk with their children in tow. Tobias tells Kitty she didn't have to join him out at such a late hour, but she gets why he likes that time of night. San Francisco is the most serene during the hours just before dawn. Tobias muses that his fanciful creativity is not profitable enough for their family to live a good life. For instance, he was fascinated by the Autobots, yet was helpless when it came to trying to replicate a measure of what they were or what they could accomplish. Kitty tells him that at least she appreciates two of his more organic creations, referring to their children Toby and Catherine, when a bright yellow streetcar pulls up beside them. Kitty is utterly confused, and even Tobias is thrown off by the appearance of the locomotive, until Bumblebee reveals himself. He greets Tobias and reminisces for a bit before cutting to the chase. Earth was under threat from an extraterrestrial entity once again, and, once again, the Autobots needed Tobias's help. Mr. Muldoon's thoughts immediately go to the Decepticons, but B tells him that this time the threat is organic, like humanity, but also so far removed from humanity that it cannot be called anything less than godlike. In fact, the Autobots' memory banks have their information stored under the title of the Elder Gods, which indicates that early Cybertronians might have interacted with these terrifying deities, but that prospect is not important right now. What's important is electricity, because B believes that this new resource holds the key to defeating the Great Old Ones once and for all, for it can do what no other person can: bring Optimus Prime back online. Prime was missing from most of the Hearts of Steel storyline, making many readers at the time wonder why that was the case. Well, Infestation 2 Transformers answered that question. He was needed for a far bigger threat than Megatron's lackeys. With their impromptu plan in place, Tobias and Bumblebee leave for New York in search of the man who ruled the world of electricity in the late 19th century. Two inventors feud and an Autobot's doom. The race against time begins. Tobias arrives in Schenectady, New York, a week after his meeting with Bumblebee, to plead his case for a massive electrical discharge to the man who is renowned for holding at least 1,093 US patents in his active lifetime, Thomas Alva Edison himself. According to Tobias, the Autobots needed about 1 million watts of energy to be dispensed instantaneously into Optimus Prime's body in order to wake him up. When Tobias made this known to the champion of DC current, he was called a madman by Edison and kicked to the curb. But that is where he also found the solution to his problems. Nikola Tesla, the champion of AC current and one of Edison's muckers, offered to help Tobias solve his problems. Tesla resents Edison's attitude toward the concept of electricity itself, not to mention the fact that he stole the work done by his muckers, aka hired scientists, for his own patents. Determined to strike out on his own and make a statement about his scientific prowess, Tesla was eager to take on a project like the one Tobias was proposing, because it was far more challenging than anything Edison's electrical works could provide him. So he agreed to sign up for Muldoon's crackpot schemes despite not knowing why he needed the energy, and was told to meet him at the train station at a certain time. Tesla asked Tobias how he would recognize the train car they were supposed to board, to which Muldoon simply replied that he would know once he got there. The scene then shifts to Port Cenotaph in Nova Scotia that same day, and this is a far grimmer picture than the one we just left. Fish-like beings are climbing onto the piers of this human settlement by the hundreds, flooding it with their slimy bodies and webbed hands and feet. Ironhide has clandestinely tracked them this far and come to the conclusion that this isn't just an infestation. It's an invasion. There were thousands of these creatures teeming within the waters, and if the Autobots had not been warned by him, Earth might have already been overrun. But he didn't have a lot of time to pat himself on the back because, just then, he was set upon by Bone Crusher. The behemoth Decepticon starts trash-talking Ironhide, who remarks that Megatron finally woke him up. But to his surprise, Bone Crusher states that Megatron lies sleeping still, and that he serves a new master now. Ironhide looses a missile on him to put him down right next to his former master, but Bone Crusher is different from what he remembered. The Decepticon is an organic being now, powered and controlled by an entity thousands of millennia old. Bone Crusher calls himself a tool of God, and Ironhide jokes that he's a tool alright, but the scene shifts once again, leaving their fates unknown for the time being. Elsewhere, Nikola Tesla and Tobias Muldoon make their way into Ontario, Canada, inside of Bumblebee, with the former completely unaware of the latter fact. Tesla is amused by the things that Muldoon tells him about the train car they are using, how it doesn't use combustibles to power itself, and how it follows an automated path, thus needing no crew members, when Nikola calls him a madman, just like Edison did before. But once they arrive at their destination, Mr. Tesla's doubts turn into delight as the race against time only intensifies. A tricky trek and a haunting portside. Issues and solutions. A puzzled Nikola Tesla steps out of the train car 300 miles south of Ivujivik, Ontario. He's puzzled because Tobias had enlisted his help for the creation of a structure that could channel 1,000,000 watts of electricity in an instant. He had expected to be headed to a laboratory or a research facility, but found himself surrounded by wilderness with no means of transportation in sight. Well, that isn't strictly true, because no sooner had Tesla revealed his concerns to Tobias than he instructed the Autobots to reveal themselves. Tesla is amazed at the fact that the Autobots are living, intelligent machines, and Trailblazer thanks him for the compliment, then proceeds to reveal Optimus Prime's location to Tobias. Nikola asks Muldoon if he created the Autobots, and he almost laughs at the prospect, telling him that they were visitors from another galaxy who could assume the form of any kind of human technology that exists. He tells Tesla about the first time they met a few years ago, and how the Transformers helped to build the Union Pacific Rail line, and affirms his acknowledgement of the fact that he was part of a secret chapter in Earth's history. The pair of inventors stepped inside Wheeljack's transformed body and set off for Prime's location, as the scene reverts to Port Cenotaph for a brief moment to reveal a scene straight out of a horror movie. A ship arrives at the port and the captain is dumbfounded. Usually, the port should be a hive of activity at this time of day, but there was nary a boat in sight. The young lad helping the skipper out noticed that the people of the port had all gathered at the quayside, as if something had happened. He concluded it must have been a funeral gathering because the area was deathly silent, but it was at that moment when the pair and their dog realized that this was the quiet before the storm. Every Seacon under the control of the Elder Gods rose up all around the port, and tentacles pulled the ship down into the depths, with the fate of the 2 men and 1 canine on board left unknown. The infestation had begun well in earnest, and time was running out as the scene changed to show the Autobots arriving at their destination, the northern slope of the Mare Rurik Glacier. Tesla wonders what it could be that the Autobots and Tobias wanted him to power up out loud. Was it an engine? An energy grid of some kind? Tobias was unaware of their exact purpose as well, until Trailblazer led them to the jagged edge of an ice shelf and showed them their purpose. There, covered in snow with jagged icicles all around him, lay Optimus Prime, the leader of the Autobots and undeniably one of the strongest beings of his species. Prime wasn't able to intervene in the Union rail line situation because, well, he was serving time as an obstacle. But now the world was at stake, and according to Trailblazer, only he could save it. This is where the first issue of Infestation 2 Transformers ends. The following and final issue opens up much like the first one with a ship at sea, but the circumstances are somehow far worse. The rise of the Great Old One and the beginning of the end. Whilst sailing through the North Atlantic Ocean a few weeks after the incidents that transpired aboard the USS Miskatonic, the HMS Indomitable comes across the Unfathomable, a group of survivors. The captain asks his first mate why they were coming upon a lifeboat when America wasn't at war with anyone. How could the Miskatonic simply go missing? His questions were interrupted by the faces of the men upon the lifeboat, because they were not normal. They were frozen with fear, and the men were no longer men, but corpses who served as a warning to any who saw them. The scene shifts to Port Cenotaph, which has completely come under the influence of the great elder god residing underneath the sea. A priest heralds the coming of his great new savior. He says that once the world was covered by the sea, and at its end, to the sea it shall return. Their immortal master will ensure that happens when he comes ashore, and the priest implores his followers to chant his name. Though his name is never actually spoken in the text of this issue, it's clear who is being talked about here. The ruler of the corpse city of R'lyeh, the endless dreamer, Cthulhu. The great elder god rose from the depths of his forgotten kingdom and emerged in the realm of men after countless millennia to feed upon the living as payment for his imprisonment. As the narrator muses that Cthulhu's rising means that, in the end, the dead would be the fortunate ones, the scene shifts 600 miles away. Deep in the Mare Rurik Glacier, the inventor Nikola Tesla unveils a design for a Tesla Tower that will help the Autobots revive their dormant leader. He explains his design to the Autobots, who marvel at his ingenuity, the idea to draw electricity from the Earth's electromagnetic field especially. Tesla fires up his makeshift Tesla Tower and gets the Autobots to charge it, but it seems like it won't work. One after the other, all of their batteries die as Tesla stares at the machine in awe of his own creation, while Tobias looks on with concern and horror naked upon his face. This was their one shot to save mankind. What would happen if they had just blown it to bits? World converges on Port Cenotaph, the last hope. The scene reverts to open waters once again, with the HMS Indomitable as our setting. The crew is marveling at the fact that France, Britain, Germany, and the United States had managed to gather a joint fleet with such haste given their long and bloody history with one another, but the captain wasn't surprised. Every one of those nations had lost ships, cargo, and men to this particular port in Nova Scotia, with no earthly explanation being able to accurately describe their disappearance. He recalled the faces of the men who he had seen come off the USS Miskatonic, and wondered exactly what kind of beast it is into whose jaws they are now heading at full speed. He notes that Port Cenotaph has not returned so much as a telegram in weeks, and reckons that whatever they find there, it will be something that they will have to aim their guns at. Meanwhile, Nikola Tesla and Tobias Muldoon are coming to terms with death and their failures in the face of it. Tesla chides himself for failing Tobias despite believing his idea would truly work. Muldoon tells him he himself believed in talking train cars, so it isn't exactly Tesla's fault. Both men look prepared to succumb to hypothermia as Nikola exclaims they are both madmen, but just as all hope seems lost, the leader of the Autobots awakens. Optimus Prime had been sleeping for millennia and couldn't possibly remember anything about what happened when he went under, yet the first thing he expressed was his concern for his brethren, for after inquiring about the year, he asked why his brothers were standing inert. Nikola Tesla brought him up to speed on the dating system, and Tobias gave him the rundown on everything that had transpired so far. Prime stated that he would reawaken his brothers with his energon reserves, but for now he wanted to know what corrupted his millennia-long slumber. And the answer, grimly enough, was an elder god. Back at Port Cenotaph, the fight between the forces of humanity and Cthulhu's followers hasn't been going well for the former. Backed by Decepticons, Deep Ones, and humans enthralled by his great power, Cthulhu was able to keep the combined navy of 4 nations at its back foot. When he was last awake, the Earth's sky was on fire, the sun was young, and extinction was the order of the day. With his reawakening, he would return the world to its nascent stage. Ironhide has been turned over to his side after his encounter with Bonecrusher, but this is where our story finally takes that positive turn it has desperately needed. Optimus Prime arrives at the scene with his force of reawakened, re-energized Autobots, and starts taking it to Cthulhu's forces. They go for the Cybertronians first, given that they are kin after all, and Prime tries to reason with Ironhide to cast out the parasites in his brain and return him to their side, but quickly realizes that this is a problem he must eradicate from its roots. He heads off to face the big tentacle beard by himself, as a French sailor remarks that his followers are fish people, and another simply asks him to fillet them like fish. As Cthulhu's tentacles try to kill more sailors by submerging them in the water, something cuts through them. That something, of course, is Optimus Prime. In something of an anticlimactic ending, Optimus Prime manages to single-handedly beat Cthulhu and send him back to Relay. He tells Tobias he isn't sure if Cthulhu will ever return again, because beings like him are capable of surviving the most extreme of circumstances. But if he does, it would not be in his lifetime. And, even if he did, the Autobots would return to save the day. The last page shows the military commanders cornering Tesla and Muldoon, thinking that they were part of the bewitched population of Cenotaph. They exclaim that they aren't, and can explain everything that has happened here. But after looking at the corpse of a Decepticon, they decide better of it and just act as taken aback as them. Thus, the robotic denizens of Cybertron did manage to subdue the threat presented by H.P. Lovecraft's greatest creation, or dream vessel, whichever you prefer to see Cthulhu as. Marvelous verdict. Infestation 2 Transformers does a good job of respecting H.P. Lovecraft's work and maintaining its terrifying essence within its own story. What it doesn't do well is sticking the landing, because after a ton of great build-up, it ends on a very abrupt note. Cthulhu was literally taken care of off-screen. Cthulhu! Off-screen! That is a very jagged pill to swallow for us, who were fans of Lovecraft's deeply disturbing horror. But as a mashup of the most unexpected franchises, Infestation 2 Transformers does an amazing job of introducing the madness of the great old ones to the steampunk world of Hearts of Steel. If you're looking for a good action-adventure combined with a slice of nerd history and a healthy drizzling of cosmic horror, then this is definitely something you should check out. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This has been Corey Whelan for Marvelous Videos. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.